both of those board meetings. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, vote aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The meeting minutes of October 12th and October 26th carry. Next up is the resolution to approve the October bill list. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion around the bill list? If not, the motion to approve the October bill list, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Next up is the superintendent's report. From Laura.
And I'm happy to let you know that we have a student presentation. We have Mrs. Beth DeRosier is a teacher here at Arrowhead and also one of the advisors of ROCAPA, which is the Social Studies Honor Society, an active group at our school, and some of the members of that group would like to present what the purpose is of their group and some of their activities, and a big one coming up on Friday.
All right. Good evening, students, faculty, and parents. I am Courtney Weston, a senior and president of ROCAPA Honor Society here at Arrowhead. For those of you who are unfamiliar, ROCAPA is among the various national honor societies Arrowhead offers, with a focus on social studies related curricula. We host numerous community events, which the majority of the time are available for any students at Arrowhead to attend. Our annual Veterans Day breakfast is one of our most popular.
Hi everyone, my name is Cadence Klostermeyer. I'm a junior here at the school and I serve as co-secretary on the ROCAPA Executive Board. So this Friday, we're hosting our annual Veterans Day breakfast in the South Campus cafeteria. And during this event, we invite local veterans to come join us for a complimentary breakfast as well as a ceremony, which includes performances from South Campus choirs, bands, and we also include student speakers. ROCAPA also provides various other activities for students here to enjoy.
Hi, I'm Laurel Urban. I'm a junior here at Arrowhead. I'm also a co-secretary on ROCAPA's executive board. So ROCAPA hosts events such as our movie nights, guest speakers, and occasionally performances. And all of our activities focus on social studies related topics such as politics, and we have history, economics, cultural studies, and the social sciences. In addition to these events, we also commonly are recognized for our This Day in History slideshow display in both the North Campus and the South Campus's study halls.
So students in ROCAPA are tasked with creating a research informational slide to inform students about interesting historical events for that day in history. For example, did you know that 84 years ago today, East Germany denounced the Berlin Wall, which to us ROCAPA kids is incredibly fascinating.
If you are, or if you know a student who is currently a sophomore or a junior this school year, you may be eligible to apply to be a part of next year's chapter of ROCAPA. Applications will be available in early spring or early summer. Please contact Mr. Flesh or Mr. Rosier if you have any more questions or would like more information on how to apply. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. Currently our chapter, how many people do we have in our chapter? About 35. Yeah, and I think that's pretty big in comparison to last year too. Normally we have more upperclassmen joining more seniors, starting for their first time rather in comparison to juniors. But students who are sophomores who are going to be juniors for the next school year are also eligible to apply.
What are some of the requirements to get in?
So you have to take, I believe, 6 social studies credits to be eligible to apply. You have to have, I believe, above a 3.5 GPA in those classes. And then in addition to that, if you're a sophomore who is applying, you don't have to be currently in a social studies club, but if you are applying as a junior going to be a senior, you need to be involved in one of the 3 social studies clubs we offer at Arrowhead, which are SAVE, Model UN, and JSA. So you have to be in one of those three. And then when you're currently like in Rho Kappa like us, you have to be actively participating in one of those three clubs as well.
And mock trial has been added now.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Ellen was excited about that.
Yeah.
So I know you have the Veterans Day breakfast on Friday, Thursday or Friday,
Right.
but how many people do you have attend typically?
Currently, I believe we have 50 people who are RSVP. Normally, we have a couple extra veterans who show up as well. But our RSVP date was October 31st. So
I'm just kind of curious, I think this is a great lane. I love that it's kind of a mix of history and social studies and politics. I applaud you, and I'm just kind of curious, don't want to put you on the spot, but moving forward, this interest right now, where does it lead you on your path, potentially through college?
personally, for me, I intend on being an international studies major. I'm currently in the global capstone and seminar program as well, along with Allie. So I'm very social studies oriented. So when I found out that I could apply to be part of Rho Kappa, that really excited me. And I honestly was really honored that there was an honor society for something I wanted to go into. I know that there's the Spanish Honor Society, which I'm a part of as well, along with just the general National Honor Society here at Arrowhead. But I really appreciated that there was something specific for me.
For me, I would say not only does our club focus on USA politics, but also other countries. And I really want to travel internationally someday, go to college somewhere outside of the States. So this club has also opened doors for me, just exploring those areas.
I feel like I share similar sentiments there. Going into college, I want to pursue psychology, which isn't fully related with social studies, but I feel like throughout my entire academic career, I focused on enriching myself as a person and as a future citizen. And I, like Noelle, would absolutely love to go abroad, perhaps study abroad, and utilize these opportunities that are offered here to me at Arrowhead to further these interests.
I commend you, young ladies, for what you're doing. It's always very helpful and enlightening to go abroad and learn things from other cultures. I commend you. Go for it.
Very well spoken. Nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And that's the end of my superintendent report. Since last month's was 90 minutes or so. Thought it would be wise to.
Really appreciate that. So thank you very much, ladies. It was just, it was great to hear from you. Thank you so much. Okay, that leads us into committee reports. First up is curriculum, and unfortunately,
Citizen comments?
I'm so sorry. That's the yellow sheet that's been directed right under my nose. Okay, first up is John Northhouse. Before we start, I should probably read the usual list of roles, which I did not make up, but I am fortunate to be able to share with you. The communications and comments from members of the public agenda item requires number 1. Anyone wishing to speak to the board must be present and register on the sign-up form. A 3-minute time limit is enforced. Public comment is only accepted during this agenda item. Sharing of minutes and another person addressing the board is not permitted. Speakers should address the board as a whole, not individual board members, and should remain polite and respectful. Only the board president may respond to the comments or questions. The board president has the authority to ask another board member or administrator to respond. Board members will not respond to public comments unless designated by the board president. The board president has the authority to cease any conversation at any time for any reason. Public comments will be taken under advisement if public comments are in regard to an agenda item, when the board discusses that particular item during the meeting, The board may or may not address the comments or questions raised by the public. Only the board will discuss and or take action. There will be no citizen communications during the time of agenda topics. Speakers are not immune from legal consequences related to the content of their speech. I would like to add one additional comment, and at this point, I would do it not on behalf of the board, but only on behalf of this particular board member. We welcome student presentations during public comment. It's great for us as we gain your insight. And I think it's really good for students as it gives you the opportunity for time at a podium. That said, I would offer the extra prudence that you consider that you potentially are a minor making comments during a public meeting. And I would discourage any sharing of confidential information on things as they pertain to health or school records. Some of the topics you might deem that are personal in nature. In general, keep in mind that this is a recording of a public meeting and you will now be a permanent part of it. So with that, we'll have John Norcross kick things off. Thank you.
And delighted to hear about the global aspirations of students, the big world. And I think we'll get into it. Policy 334 on curriculum transparency is up for discussion and potential action at tonight's board meeting. I appreciate the long discussion of this policy on November 3rd. However, there is a perception in the community that it still seems rooted in a lingering lack of awareness, which is understandable. I think how many people in our community don't have students in the system? Is like 70%?
Like 97%.
Yeah, maybe. So it's understandable that people will be lacking in awareness of existing tools such as Canvas and Skyward. But we know better. We know that we do have that curriculum transparency. So this still is not a policy that is necessary. At worst, there's a concern that is still rooted in suspicion and distrust of educators about the way they might approach topics, and that sends a very bad message to our teachers, both current and future. I still maintain it represents a burden. It's a burden that we've already said is unnecessary because the policy is unnecessary, but it comes at a time when there are many other changes to the school schedule that are already underway. This is a very, very busy and compressed time. It is also, in my view, too broad in its scope, and the discussion of what needs to be updated on Canvas, the all means all discussion, seems to lead us back where we started, where all seems to mean supplementary book descriptions, title, author, ISBN, website resources, digital materials, video, audio descriptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's all enumerated. So that seems to be what all means. That is very broad. It's very burdensome. I value, like you do, transparency, and I believe we already have transparency. And we know that parents weren't asking for this policy, but I understand the community members may have feared that there was a lack of transparency. If those community members felt there was an issue with curriculum transparency, the best thing to do is to bring them up to speed, up to the level of your understanding, and let them know the good news. We have transparency in the curriculum. Our teachers are valued professionals, and we want to help them do their job. We want to get out of their way. So please send policy 334 back to committee or abandon it altogether and choose a different effort to engage the community. Lastly, again, for the record, I formally request that policy 651 be immediately halted and that the educational gag order policy 333 on non-discrimination in the curriculum also be rescinded. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up is Kieran Rush.
I would like to start by issuing a general possible trigger warning. Just beware. But we need to remember that although being transgender at school is hard and people may bully them for being who they are, not allowing a student to identify as themselves is also bullying. The way that I see it as a transgender student is that in the school board enforcing this policy, the teachers are being forced to bully transgender students whose parents don't support them rather than being that support for them. Teachers would have to do things like dead naming, misgendering, declining a student's sense of identity, and many other things that target the transgender community. It's the students whose parents won't sign off on their name and pronouns that need to look to the school and community for that support. So why are we taking the support away from the students that need it most? And why would we take what is potentially one of the only safe places for a group of students and make it unsafe? There are a lot of students that don't have supportive parents, so they come to school and they leave the house and they go anywhere that would accept them. And school used to be one of the safest places for me. It was an escape from constantly having to act out a role of someone that I'm definitely not. However, after the school board passed policy 651, I felt the most unsafe that I ever had. I remember sitting in the back of this very room holding hands with all of my friends as tight as I could, absolutely terrified of what you would vote for. And I remember quite literally falling to the ground, crying and hopeless. I remember driving home with the impulsive thoughts of what would happen, you know? I remember the 2.5 shower of changing the temperature until the thoughts went away. Just me standing there, fully clothed, with burning hot and freezing cold sensations, until I finally felt safe enough in my own home to try to get any sleep for the night. I didn't. I went back to school the next day, and it was lunch, and I sat there having one of the worst panic attacks that I have had in months. I was sitting there and I was rubbing my hands against the carpet out of anxiety, and I went to my therapy appointment later that day, and we went outside and I screamed at the top of my lungs for I don't even know how long. But I sat there scared, alone, and hopeless in a school that I no longer feel safe in, because how can I feel safe in a school run by a community that doesn't support who I am? As much as I wish I could, I cannot change who I am. I did not sign up for this life, but I got it anyway. So all I can do is try to make an influence for change with it. And so with that, I ask you to please reconsider policy 651. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Ryan?
The principle that a family and school should be as closely interlinked for students as the board wants it to be is harmless in the very best cases and dangerous at the worst. One of the greatest founding principles of public education is that it can be a safe haven for children with a bad environment at home. If your life at home is great, then schools hope to be just as good. If not, then they hope to make it as great as it can be for the 7 hours you're at school. Policy 651 and future policies passed with the same principle undermine the school's ability to be a safe haven. Students aren't, and they have a vast negative disproportionate effect on students with a bad home life. These students aren't just hypothetical statistics. They're real people. They're people like me. They're people like me who wake up every day questioning if their parents really do love them. They're the people who can barely focus in their classes because all they can think about is ending their own life. They're the people who come to school hoping that even if only for 7 hours, they can be themselves and feel supported. They're the people the school board is currently kicking while they're already down. They're the people these policies negatively affect. With policies like these, instead of school being a safe haven for these students, it is going to be exactly the opposite. It is forcing these students to be here and have the voices, the doubts, and the abuse of their parents rolling around in their heads so loudly that they cannot even hear themselves think. It is allowing parents like these to control what happens to their children in a facility that they will never go to, with teachers they will never meet, which will be reinforced by classmates who they will never hear about. Sure, not every parent is bad, but policy 651 doesn't much affect students with great parents. There's not a single grade, field trip form, or tardy that can make my dad throw a shoe at me, cuss at me, and give me the middle finger. There's not a single grade, field trip form, or tardy that can make my stepmom so angry that she would demand I call my biological mom and ask to move back in with her. Seeing me in a dress made both of them do exactly that. Comparing someone's identity and their autonomy over who they share emotions with, especially regarding a topic as sensitive as gender, to disciplinary action and field trip forms is not only logically fallacious, but it is also a grossly ignorant justification that boils away all of the nuance required for complex issues like policy 651. As Adam Kurth said last meeting during the bullying presentation, even as adults, it is sometimes hard to realize the consequences of our actions. But hey, I may be only the 10th student and 20th person to come here to explain the consequences. I explained how it directly added to my general feeling of despair and my suicidal thoughts. I guess the problem was that I didn't finish committing suicide. Maybe the 11th student will explain it in a way that has them finishing their suicide attempt. Maybe then the board will listen, but maybe not. And I want to make it clear that that was not a threat on my life in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Lindsay?
So I wanted to say this in the open mic, but I didn't get here in time, so I apologize. But I just want to say a big thank you from the swim team to all of you for giving us a chance. And a little bit of an update from our lovely swim team. We won sectional, and we are pretty much 17 out of 18 making it to state, and we're favored to win. And also 4 of our seniors actually signed D1 scholarships today. So pretty incredible on that aspect. Thank you. And then I just want to let you know we're still working on figuring a lot of things out, and we do want to work with you guys. So I appreciate the opportunity. And like I said, I wanted to say this earlier, but I didn't get here in time. So thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate you circling back. It was a big, arduous discussion, I think, and we appreciate you coming back to kind of report in. Congratulations and best wishes for state performance. Danielle? Oh. Okay, I think that that concludes the public comment section of the meeting. Thank you all for participating. Okay, moving on then to committee reports. The first up is curriculum. As Chairperson Kemmer is not here, I'll take the liberty to just kind of very much brief everyone on what came out of the curriculum committee meeting that was held on October 13th. And then I'll offer up to those that were in attendance and Laura and Sue, if you have anything else to comment. In essence, the course of the conversation was primarily around the English Honors 10 revisions that were made and the rationale for making those revisions in the first place. Additionally, Phil Casson came in and presented some things on the Model United Nations Club and the field trip that's being proposed and under consideration as an action item this evening. And lastly, I think Sue gave another update on the schedule change exploration and the work for team. And maybe I'll just turn it over to you, Sue, and you can update us from there.
So the board tonight has 2 things to approve from the curriculum committee meeting discussion. The first is the approval of a course that we're bringing back into the curriculum, Honors English 10. It's a year-long course. Following Honors English 9, it fills a gap between Honors English 9 and AP Lit and Lang, kind of creating a more incremental steps, scope and sequence in the English department. So we're hoping for an approval for that for the fall of 23-24. And then the other action for the board today to consider is that Model UN field trip in Boston. And our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for November 6th in the evening.
I can actually confirm with the chairperson Kemmer having weighed in that we're on for the 16th. What we have all kind of decided to do in consultation between Laura and Sue and Amy Hummer was to hold the next curriculum meeting as an evening session. As you might be aware, all of our committee meetings are held at 6:45 in the morning. It's a bit of a rush for parents who want to sit in at our curriculum meetings and be present. It's sometimes difficult for parents to attend. And at times they are difficult to frame in time-wise because the content that we want to get through is often, much more than we're able to take on for an hour and a half or so. And And so the thought process was, if we can throw it into an evening session, we might be able to pick up some parents who would be interested in hearing the discussion, as well as allow for a larger framing period for better engagement and discussion on the topic. So we're on for November 16th, and looking forward to having Amy come back. So the first item that's up for discussion and action is then the new course proposal for Honors English 10. And I would open that up to the board for any further discussion.
I move that we accept the proposal and move it forward.
I would offer discussion on that, and I do apologize that I was unable to make the last curriculum committee meeting. So I looked at this item as it was posted to the agenda, and really kind of keyed into how it had been reviewed and the need for the revisions, and looking at things from looking at the writing, speaking and listening goals along with the standards. I applaud the team for the revision itself. I think it was appropriate, and things are clear and very rigorous. I do have questions, in particular on I guess where this goes. I think in particular, the question I have is the comment that's made here that I can read is: the pandemic has exacerbated all previous academic and social emotional issues. And I'm uncertain where that leaves us as I start looking at the books that are outlined for both Honors English 9 as well as Honors English 10. Many of them I'm familiar with, some I was not. And with the board's approval, I would like to go through the books that are outlined and provide a brief synopsis of those books. One of the first ones listed is a book called Challenger Deep. It's about a young adult that follows 15-year-old Caden Bosch as he descends into mental illness and recovers. Over the past several months, Caden has slowly lost his grip on reality, unable to focus on anything, constantly needing to walk, believing a kid at school wants to kill him, and being visited by a pirate captain. Another book is entitled The Yellow Wallpaper. It details the deterioration of a woman's mental health while she is on a rest cure on a rented summer country estate with her family. Her obsession with the yellow wallpaper in her bedroom marks her descent into psychosis from her depression throughout the story. Another book is entitled The Marrow Thieves. It's a survival story set in Canada where recruiters harvest the bone marrow of Indigenous peoples. They do so to serve a non-Indigenous clientele that has lost the ability to dream and hopes to restore their dreams by consuming Indigenous marrow. There's a TED Talk entitled We Say Never Again. It's a journalistic look at the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland and the fight for gun control. Another book under consideration is October Morning, which relates from various points of view events from the night of October 6th, 1998, when 21-year-old Matthew Shepard, a gay college student, was lured out of a Wyoming bar, savagely beaten, tied to a fence, and left to die. Told through a cycle of 68 poems. The Ones Who Walk Away from Omalis depicts the summer festival in the utopian city of Omalis, whose prosperity depends on the perpetual misery of a child. Slenderman, online obsession, mental illness, and the violent crime of two Midwestern girls. And then lastly, by the famed nihilist, Nietzsche, Beyond Good and Evil. So again, from my perspective, while I applaud the need to reevaluate based on the comments back from students and certainly reevaluation necessary following some of the outcomes of the pandemic, I do pose the question as we're looking at social emotional issues with our students. The bulk of these books sound extremely dark to me, and I question the book choices, and part and parcel of approving this evening would include those book choices.
Some of the book choices that are in the proposal for Honors English 9 are already approved as part of the Honors English 9 curriculum. We put them in there as a reference point for what students would be reading in Honors English 9 to how that would connect them to Honors English 10 and the standards that they address. So some of the books that you listed are part of the curriculum already.
So basically, they kind of continue on a very dark line.
Well, I think the outcomes of some of those books, and I haven't read them all myself, but I think coming back to the department, they would tell you that the outcomes of the discussions of those books aren't always in a dark discussion, but sometimes an uplifting discussion. I did read Challenger Deep this summer, and I think it yields a good discussion about hope and lifting yourself out of problems you might be experiencing, and our students do find the book to be engaging. For example.
Are there any other comments from board members?
Boy, that's kind of overwhelming. I personally, as a single board member, feel like there should be a little bit more balance. I mean, I can speak to, there's a book when my girls were freshmen that they had to read. I think they were freshmen and they were sophomores. That was called What Made Maddie Run. I don't know how many of you read it, but I read part of it because my daughter was having nightmares about it. And I'll read you a little bit of the synopsis of what this book is about. The secret struggles and tragic death of an all-American teen centers on Madison Halloran, promising young athlete at the University of Pennsylvania who committed suicide in 2014. Then it goes on to tell you more about it. One of my daughters, her quote to me was, "They put thoughts in my head." I understand the desire to have rigorous dialogue with the students, but I do feel like, I mean, holy cow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, 8 very dark topics. I mean, can we have some balance?
I think we do. I think those are just some of the books that were in the proposed list. But if we want to kick it back to committee and we can hear with the teachers about what you would suggest in light of preparing students for advanced placement coursework, we'd be glad to sit down and listen to what you would suggest would be better book choices. The reason why we did put them in the book selection is we didn't want the course to be approved and for our teachers to work tirelessly, of course, to prepare course lessons and curriculum and assessments, and then have books be challenged later. So if it's prudent to bring it back to curriculum for discussion, we can certainly do that. We can talk about balance. We can talk about how they connect to the standards. We could go into more detail than we already did as part of the curriculum discussion. Curriculum committee discussion.
I mean, I also don't personally think that it would be a good idea for the board to select the books. I do like the idea of the teachers being.
That is our policy, right? But we'd like to hear from the board what would be acceptable. So we know put work into
I mean, just not so many
developing
dark
curriculum
topics.
where the books will then be kicked back and we've got this vicious cycle. So a good, honest conversation about what we'd like to see. Then we'll take a look at that. I can maybe speak better having that information ahead of time to speak to the value. Because we do need to look at any piece of literature for its full value to the student, perhaps not just the synopsis of a particular novel or essay, but really understanding how that value of that particular piece of literature or that essay connects to the outcomes of what we're after. So we could probably speak to that in more detail with some time to prepare that.
It's primarily juniors or seniors taking this course.
Honors English 10 would be sophomores.
Sophomores. So I think age appropriateness is also something that we should discuss as it relates to the actual policy we have in place for.
Generally, these are all part of high school curricula.
I agree with Chris and Kim. I struggle, and I feel like it's a slippery slope to micromanage at the book level in this case. It's gonna be tough for the board to manage, and there's a part of us that needs to have faith that the administration is selecting appropriate material, but this leads me to even greater support for transparency in curriculum, because these are going to be posted on Canvas, required to be posted, and hopefully they'll inspire some discussion between parents and kids.
Just, our current process with any novel that we read in any of our English curriculum goes into the syllabus. It goes forward with a synopsis and a rationale, and the opportunity for any student then, if there's a reason to select an alternative, that's always offered and has been in place for a really long time.
So, like I said, I feel like, as a parent, if the book does trouble my kid, I want to have that conversation, and be able to talk about why.
We invite parents oftentimes, the book that Chris referred to, the teacher in that case, so read it with us. We'd love to hear your feedback. We're very open. There's usually a letter inviting parents to read the selections.
So I believe there's in courses like this, correct me if I'm wrong, an opt-out provision for parents to say, I don't want my child to read this particular book. Is that correct?
Yes,
I think
that's why the rationale and the information is provided to parents in the syllabi at the beginning of the semester.
I think it would be helpful to have that conversation with you and others. In that regard, I would withdraw my motion.
Thank you. Try the second.
Daryl.
I did.
Just for clarity, the reason this was brought forward tonight is that I did miss the curriculum meeting, and this came as an attachment to an agenda that we just recently had access to. I mean, this just got attached.
This would have been attached to the original curriculum committee agenda in October.
Yes. Yes, I understand. At a time when, unfortunately, I was unable to devote a lot of time and attention to that. So, as again, this came to my eyes just recently, it comes to you just now. I guess I'm hearing that we can potentially move this back to curriculum committee and further discussion with Sue and her team.
Might I make a suggestion that we remove the novels, but in concept, move the honors English 10 course forward so we can get it in the course guide and into our course selection materials on time, and review the novels as long as we review them.
That makes good sense.
Let's make a motion to approve that.
I second that.
Any further discussion on that?
So then do we need to have a motion to kick back the novels part after that, or how does that work? Or if you have any,
Or is it
or once we do that part, do we just?
I would think your motion would want to say you're approving the course moving forward with the extraction of the novels to be discussed in committee, something to that nature. So it's clear for the record, it's not adopted verbatim as it is in the document.
Okay, I'll withdraw my motion.
So the motion that I'm looking for here then is approval to proceed with the honors 10 revisions with the omission of the books that have been listed in the reading portion as subject to further review.
Well spoken, Kim. I move toward that.
Do I have a second? Any further discussion? All in favor? so-
one additional discussion, point. If there's a part of that, we need to go back. I would like to have more context on the role of this back from the students. There's some feedback, at least I'm receiving as feedback, like the students have their comments around the course, so.
That was around AP.
Yeah.
Lang.
AP.
Why we were moving from AP Lang as sophomores to an honors English 10 bridge course because of the challenge of where they were at with AP.
Because wasn't it the transition from 9 to AP? That's why they were.
That was
Just to clarify.
part of the rationale.
Yeah, got it, thank you, I misunderstood. I like those comments, they're fun.
Anything else? Okay, moving ahead with that motion, you're good with that? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. I will inform Chairman Tanner as well to add this to the agenda for the curriculum committee.
Well, I'm just going to clarify for the 16th curriculum committee meeting in, no.
I don't foresee that. Perhaps you can inform better as to your deadlines.
Well, in terms of the conceptual approval, we're good for December, but then that should probably be on like our December, whatever date that's going to be identified as. Yeah, that should probably be on the December then. Just to clarify, thanks.
No, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, everyone. Next up is Chairperson Thompson, Finance and Legislation.
We don't have a model UN.
I'm so sorry. Yes. Discussion and action on the proposal for the model UN field trip to Boston, February 9th through the 12th.
Make a motion to approve the trip.
The second,
Any discussion around this? So there's a motion to approve the Model UN Club field trip as drafted. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Here, Craig.
we had a brief meeting, regarding finance and legislation immediately after our special meeting. It was, approved a moment ago, or a few minutes ago. The committee discussed ideas regarding the legislative advocacy for the Wisconsin Public School funding. Just a little context, for quite a long time, Finance and Legislation Committee has been primarily and maybe only almost exclusively focused on finance. And of late, we're working more on legislation, or on the legislative aspect of it, because it looks like our schools' funding are in trouble with the state of Wisconsin. And so in terms of adequacy. So we discussed those kinds of things. What can we do from legislative point of view to get the situation, rather dire situation that Wisconsin public schools are in, to the attention of our legislators in Madison. So that was essentially what we talked about. There was, at the end of the conversation, a suggestion of a flyer and a letter to be drafted by administration, brought to the board for review and approval. The purpose of the flyer would be to inform and rally support from the community and other Wisconsin public school districts who are in similar unfavorable situations regarding public school funding, in order to present a united front, while the letter to the legislators will express Arrowhead specific budgetary circumstances. So thank you for Lynn for taking the initiative on these things, and we will be in future conversations about this.
Excellent, thank you.
Can I interject for a moment?
Mhm.
Within the area of finance, I think it might be advantageous to have Jeff just give a summary of the special board meeting in terms of the budget and where the mill rate landed, because I think the public would be interested to know what the property tax, the Arrowhead portion of property tax will look like.
Oh, please do that, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you, Larry.
Sure. So at the annual meeting, the electors had approved a tax rate of $2.31. And with the way everything came through in terms of property values, revenue limit authority, and state aid, that tax rate ended up being at $2.10. So down 24 cents from a year ago and down 22 cents from what we had predicted at the end of the meeting. So all good news. Another decrease in our tax rate, and we've seen that for a number of years in a row now.
You guys sent a nice referendum sheet the other day. Could you guys follow up with what passed and what didn't from that?
It will be in your board brief.
Well,
I linked it this morning as I'm prepping that. It was of the school referenda across the state. So I provided the list for the board. 80% of those passed. But you'll be able to see which ones specifically passed and failed in your Friday memo.
I think that was the highest number of referenda on a ballot.
On ballot.
And how many were there total? There's 67 questions passed, 14 failed, so.
I think it was 88 referendum questions.
Closest.
Across the state of Wisconsin.
But hey, close to the
Like, was there any?
watershed.
Oh, sure.
Fox Point passed. Skimming through this list.
Yeah. Fort Atkinson, yeah. Fort Watertown. No. It's okay.
It's not a lot of local, like neighboring school districts out of this one.
They all passed in the last couple of years.
I want to say, I was in a meeting this morning and I want to say the number was, there's 189 school districts that have passed referenda since revenue caps have been in place. And that's, if the state's not doing it, it comes down to the local level, as our legislators told us. You know, we invite them in, they said, you'll have to try to pass a referendum without their support. So they're not fixing the funding formula. We'll see what happens in this next legislative round, but
What is that budget finalized?
the state budget, we hope by June 30th of 23 for the new biennium. Likely not much before that. So they'll start talking. Well, the governor put his out there in mid-January, mid to end of January, put his proposal out there, and then the legislative branches will put theirs out there maybe within a month afterwards. We don't know, will they just discount the governors and create their own? Will they take pieces of it? You know, it's a lot of up in the air. It's one of the toughest times to plan budgets when you don't have an idea where their heads are at. We know that we've had, out of the last 8 years, 4 bienniums, we know that only 2 of those 8 years have offered an increase in the per pupil revenue limit number. So 6 out of 8 years, we've had 0 increases. That's a number that used to increase with inflation. And so now 6 out of the last 8 years, even the 2 years when we did get an increase, it didn't even come close to inflation. So that's tough to work with. And, you know, it speaks to our aging facilities that we don't have the funds to take care of. We need to pay the staff to be able to teach kids. That's number 1 priority. The facilities will fail. So, but that's the funding formula we're under. And without a referendum, we've heard from our legislators, they're not offering a whole lot of help, if any help. So it'll be an interesting spring.
Is there a way to query schools, the districts that have not, in the last particular time period, 5 to 8 years, have not passed the referendum, that those districts may be the ones that we want to partner with, potentially writing proposed change to, common calculations.
Right, I think isn't there a list that you provided us of what schools are gonna be, or that WASB that provided us a list of what schools were also being financial challenges?
I think it was almost 30% of the state schools, wasn't it? That are at a fiscal cliff along with us, 23, 24.
Well, about 60% of the school districts are in declining enrollment. So that probably indicates more than 30% are going to be in financial trouble.
I would say it's much higher than 30%. I would put that number in 70%. I mean, anyone in decline, anyone who is stable to growing is probably doing okay. And I want to say the number of stable to growing, what is that, 10, 20% of school districts that might be stable? That would be high. That seems very high. So the majority of districts are, as you decline in enrollment, you know, it's less dollars to work with. Inflation keeps, we're looking at 8% inflation on salary negotiations. Last year was the highest we'd ever seen. Prior to that, that was 4.7%. Now we're looking at 8%.
And I'll just interject as a reminder, the raise that employees received here at Arrowhead was 2%. So we have not been matching inflation rate at all. So we're trying to balance that. If you don't pay people, they'll leave. But if you pay people at an inflationary rate, you're going to be reducing programs for kids, or you're going to have completely failing buildings and roofs caving in. So it's that balance of we don't have enough in all these pots of funding, and so it's like a shell game.
And I think, you know, if you look back over the years at property tax bills, I believe many people's property tax bills have gone down over the years. Now this year might be a little different with the valuations going up higher, you know, 15% increase in property values over equalized property value of the district. That might not see the, but our tax rate went down to 211 also. So that might balance each other out there. Got some interesting stuff coming ahead of us.
Anything more from you, Chris?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Chairperson Vinegar on Buildings and Grounds.
Great, well, Jeff painted that nice picture of the financial aspect of buildings and grounds, so we had our meeting on October 20th. Couple things that we had during that meeting, we had the Q1 fiscal Q1 dashboard, which kind of just shows, oversees the referendum spending and where we're at in terms of budget. And then also the status of the special ed project budget. And then also the priority on the infrastructure needs. One of the things that wasn't on the list that Kevin Lipscomb talked about was the addition of the main water main valve replacement in the redundancy loop. That is a pretty much, it's now like number 2 priority on our list to get fixed there. And this is coming from the recommendation of the village department of Public Works. They made that recommendation. Basically, we don't do this, we don't have water, we don't have a school, that's open. So it's very important for us to move this forward. We don't have it for a vote at this time, but in the very near future. The other thing was, in the previous month or two, we talked about, you know, instead of redoing the entire maintenance facility, that we can maybe save some money and do some restoration work on the wood columns, where we originally estimated it was going to be about, I think ballpark of just China was around 50 or 60 grand,
About 48,000.
or 48,000. But then when they dug deeper into the situation, we have a bigger problem on our hands. So, which they pretty much scoped out the original up to like $110,000. So given the high dollar value of the, fixed and, being a percentage of the building, we thought, it would be best to replace the building. And Kevin, can you talk a little bit about the funding? Or I'm sorry, not Kevin, John.
Kevin's.
I do the same thing with my kids.
Yeah. So I spoke about at the meeting, we had 2 really good budget years, the last 2 fiscal years. We're in years where we're planning to use fund balance or have deficit budgets, we actually ended up with like $1.4 million added to fund balance over that 2-year period. So seeing that this came in at over $100,000 just to make repairs, and now we still haven't done anything with the roof that will need a repair, or the walls will need some work. You're getting into some really high spend on a facility that is in a location that's not ideal, and it's a facility that is just not ideal. It's dilapidated.
And add on to it too, it's not a safe work environment for our employees to be in that building.
Well, and we're making sure.
We're making sure, but
Yeah, that it's, posts are being put in and things like that to keep it safe. So there's a small cost to that, but, so that's where, with those good budget years, this is a one-time use of fund balance to fund a project, to get this facility, taken care of, rather than investing in a repair at a large cost.
And I know in the notes here that said that we were going to vote on this on the 26th, but I don't think, looking at the special meeting notes, that never did come to a vote, so.
It was wrapped into the budget, so
Okay.
it wasn't a separate action item.
Okay,
And in committee, we had discussed it could go either way, and I
Okay.
think the consensus of the committee was to wrap it into a budget adjustment. So within
Yes.
the budget, it was definitely.
okay,
So those dollars are in the budget right now. That was
Okay.
on the 26th.
that sounds good. And then,
Do we know when that'll start the project?
We won't get much into it this fiscal year, actually. So I only put 300,000 toward it for this fiscal year. I don't think we're gonna get much further than that, by the end of June.
and then in terms of, so that's, and then Ryan Magnan, he did send us email, giving us some updates on the fundraising for pool and tennis. But for the next committee meeting, on the agenda there, we'll be talking about fundraising updates on 3 different facilities here, at Arrowhead, talking about the pool, talking about tennis, and possibly talk about the, indoor baseball, facility. And a lot of these, like I said, all 3 of them are looking at fundraising efforts, looking at from that first approach to see if we can do things with fundraising rather than tapping into our budget or entertaining the idea of referendum at this point. And that meeting will be, on the notes, it said November 17th, but we had a last minute change where that meeting will actually be on Friday, November 18th at 6:45. And that's what I have for buildings and grounds.
Thank you so much, Joe. Okay, Chairperson Langer with personnel. And again, in his absence, I will ask for both Ford and Laura to chime in. Couple of highlights from the last committee meeting. We discussed and agreed to bring to the board the prospect of a workshop and/or workshops that would build understanding of board roles, priorities, and goals, and alignments with administration Tim and Laura, were tasked with pursuing kind of a fleshed out agenda for this session, which would be led by Drew Holt. And we'll be bringing that to the board. And the committee discussed the topic of attracting and retaining employees and the related topic of maintaining a positive school culture. So Laura, I don't know, do you have anything to add from the last personnel committee?
I do not. We have not been in contact with Mr. Howick yet, as that was probably going to happen, that session, not until after the holidays. And Tim has been busy, so we haven't been in contact yet.
Is he the only consultant we're looking at right now, or potentially going to?
That seemed to be the consensus of the committee meeting.
I would suggest follow policy at the school level, at least get 2 more quotes. I don't know anybody else that does this, but
Well, there certainly are lawyers that do that kind of work quite a bit. I'm not sure what policy you're referring to, because our policy for requiring bids, I think, is for $25,000 or higher. And we're looking at $3,000 to $4,000.
so we could let this slide without the quotes.
Well, we could by policy.
I think where this arose from, and I don't want to speak for Tim, but he did bring this forward at the committee meeting. I think he had been involved in a WASB presentation, perhaps at the annual meeting, at the start of the year, and so I the board actually lead a session and was pretty impressed with him. And I think that's how Drew's name came forward. But certainly, I think if there are any other presenters,
So I think on Mr. Kurt there
Oh,
worked
that's
with
right.
them at the
Yeah.
former.
I've worked with Drew in a previous district at length in different ways, and there's not a lot, to your point of getting multiple bids, there's not a lot of people who do this kind of work. He's probably the foremost expert in Wisconsin. And like Laura said, there's lawyers who will kind of facilitate a similar discussion, but that's his job, is what Drew does.
Do you have any of the outcomes from your previous work with them?
Yeah, I mean, they've been functioning well. They passed a referendum, in a small community that we probably wouldn't. I think that was a big step for him. Though that wasn't all the work that he did there, but he did. I think galvanize the community around common priorities.
any further discussion around that? So we will wait to hear from Chairperson Langer in terms of the next meeting date. Moving beyond that, Chairperson Ferris for policy.
Thank you, Madam President. We are going to start by discussing our policy meeting on the 3rd. We had a very rigorous meeting, had a lot of things to discuss. Our first item that we discussed was actually brought to my attention by our superintendent with regards to how we pass policies. In the past, we've basically gone through all of policy and dove into everything every year. That's still the ultimate intent, but tonight we have an discussion and action point with regards to a revision of policy 121 that Laura helped craft. That also discusses the way that we as a new board are looking at policy and kind of going through it piece by piece. So it's going to be a little bit of a combination of both. So that's policy 121 that we'll be discussing shortly. And then policy 334, we had a wonderful discussion on this. I think it was a lot of good, really compromise and thoughtful consideration with regards to this policy. A few things that came to pass here is, the word that Chairperson Evers used was basically that this is not going to be punitive. I keep forgetting the word. It's a perfect word, really, that describes this policy. It's not meant to be punitive. We really want this policy to be looked at. It's not about distrust, and we want our teachers to know that we're allowing them grace with regards to implementation, as well as with regards to ongoing compliance with it. The other piece that was fantastic that our president brought up, that I think is also an interesting addition to this policy, is that teachers or chair people from the teaching committee have the opportunity to bring an opt-out if they feel that their department really isn't impacted in a way that they feel like is really all about what this policy is in regards to. So for instance, there's a good chance that FIAD, just to keep a, and just kind of a very easy subject out there, there's a good chance that FIAD is not something that this policy is trying to target with regards to transparency, because there's really nothing that they would have that would be needed to be uploaded that would be thought of from the community's point of view in any way that would be questioned. So that was a great discussion. I think we had some good discussions with regards to that. We did talk about procedure 651. Procedure 651 was tabled and moved forward to the next board meeting because of time. I do want to make a note to anyone that's might still be here. I don't know if Susan Martin is still here. She always has a great talk there. She's a wonderful speaker, and I really always appreciate her point of view. But I do want the public to, especially everyone that's here that spoke out specifically against 651, that I'll speak for myself, but I would assume the rest of the board would feel this way as well, that decisions we make with regards to our policy are not taken lightly. And we see dimensionally different points of view. We're not black and white people. And so I just wanted to put that out there because some of the people that spoke tonight did mention that, hey, this is, you guys already had your minds made up. Well, one of the people that spoke on that evening was my daughter. I personally don't take these things lightly. I don't think any of these board members take these things lightly. I don't think we're not trying to do anything punitive in any way. We're trying to do the right things for families and for the community. So having said that, that was what the meeting was about. The next meeting is going to be December 1st. And having said that, we move into the discussion and action of policy 121.
So the work that was done around policy 121, and again, thank you, Laura, for drafting some good language, and then I think Tim Randy had some additional great comments to provide us with the language where we are right now. As of right now on 121, the change that's proposed reads as follows. Policy changes and new policies will be proposed as needed to be reviewed in policy committee and considered for approval by the board. The policy committee shall ordinarily review yearly the district policy handbook and make recommendations for change to the Board of Education. Dates of policy changes shall be recorded in the official record of policy handbook. Additions and revisions as maintained in the superintendent's office. Do I have a motion to approve that language? And a second? Any further discussion around this? That policy language as drafted All in favor of adopting that policy, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you.
Then the next piece, discussion and action on policy procedure 334.
And if you hadn't seen or noticed, if you click on the word policy, that will bring you to the proposed policy. If you click on the word procedure, it'll bring you to the procedure document.
So the big changes here, we added the word all in the first paragraph. All course instructional material used throughout each semester shall be proposed to the district's learning management tool. We also added the final sentence, which was brought forth through our superintendent and our president. I think it's well worded. The intent of this policy is not to be punitive towards teachers. Implementation of this policy will come with grace, particularly as a policy and or new teachers are inducted into Arrowhead. And then finally, the last piece that was added on the bottom of policy was, should a department believe that this policy is irrelevant within their curricular area, they may work with the director of learning to develop rationale to be included in requests for exemption from the school board. So that's the policy piece. With regards to procedure, the changes that we're bringing forth here, again, the same, just to be, complete and with regards to the intent of the policy, again, is not to be punitive towards teachers. And then, again, the same opt-out language. So those are the changes.
Okay, thank you. So in relation to both policy 334 and procedure 334, transparency in curriculum, I would entertain a motion to pass, and we'll do a roll call vote.
I'll make a motion to pass both policy and procedure.
Exactly.
Is there any further discussion?
I would like some discussion, please. I would defer to anyone else if they would like to say anything first.
No, we can certainly entertain some discussion as long as it's relatively brief.
I have a couple, 3-4 minutes. If I may. First, I want to say that I value the discussion that the board has had about this policy. From the time it was first introduced until now, we've taken the time and effort to include a survey of our teachers, those most directly impacted by this proposed policy, in an effort to understand their perspective regarding its implementation. Their participation was robust in the survey, and response was overwhelmingly opposed. Further discussions after looking at the survey responses, we've taken some teacher concerns into account, as we should. It's equally important to consider parental practice and experience regarding transparency in curriculum. While it has been established that 80% of our curriculum is already posted on Canvas, Arrowhead has also identified that a mere 9% of parents are making use of this tool to observe student curriculum. The question of actual real-world need for this policy continues to plague me. Implementing a policy with little or no need for one is questionable. More on that in a moment. At last month's board meeting, we agreed to send this proposed policy back to committee, recognizing that further improvements could be made and that could be revised to be less burdensome to the teaching staff while still maintaining transparency. I'm glad that happened. In our discussion of last week's policy committee meeting, some of the burdens of compliance with that policy was reduced. I applaud the moves in that direction. Providing for a potential exemption for certain departments is helpful. Stating that the policy isn't intended to be punitive is helpful also, even as it thereby acknowledges that this perception is the case by the teaching staff. Adding the attended grace to be shown while administering the policy is likewise well intended, but needless to say, highly subjective. During the policy discussion last week, it was also suggested that paragraph 2 of the policy, listing in detail the many items needed to be included in order to ensure teacher compliance, could be struck from the policy language. That was excellent, I thought. A helpful move in the direction of unburdening our teaching staff from the difficult and time-consuming job of compliance with detailed policy requirements. But sadly, in the next breath, the word all was inserted into paragraph 1, referring to each item in paragraph 2, which had just been struck. A brief discussion ensued in an attempt to clarify the meaning and intent of the word all in this context, after which it became clear that essentially no change was effected with the policy, particularly since the accompanying procedure contains the entire detail of the aforementioned paragraph. So, the detailed burden on teaching staff remains. Why must we insist on detailed and strict control over our teaching staff? I ask you to consider a quote I came across very recently by Eugene Peterson, author, pastor, and translator of The Message, a popular modern translation of the Bible. Perhaps some of you are familiar with The Message. As a Christian leader, I'm guessing that many of the members of our board respect Pastor Peterson's Judeo-Christian perspective. As a leader of people in his organization, that is, his local church, he has constantly been aware of the impact of his leadership style on the relationships he has cultivated in his sphere of influence. I quote, "The great temptation of power is control. And the great consequence of control is lack of relationship. The minute you start becoming obsessed with control, you've lost relationship." Let me say that one more time. The great temptation of power is control, and the great consequence of control is lack of relationship. The minute you start becoming obsessed with control, you've lost relationship. Arrowhead has long been known for its logo, one team. The essence of team is relationship. Relationship with one another, board, administration, teaching staff, community. If we insist on control, we lose relationship, we lose team, we lose a sense of belonging. Unnecessary exercise of control for its own sake is harmful to a team. Therefore, why would we insist upon control in this matter when transparency already exists? In conclusion, I would hope that we would exercise a light hand in this matter. A brief statement of policy intent would be sufficient. I believe it would go a long way in building Arrowhead's one team and still accomplish our goal of transparency. I have suggested just such a statement for our consideration. I ask the chairman to pass this down. That such statement is going to be provided for you in just a moment. Thank you. I will read it as you may look at it as well. I have a simple 3-point potential policy to be discussed that could be discussed. 1, the Arrowhead School Board is committed to transparency in our curriculum. 2, the Arrowhead School Board therefore strongly urges our entire teaching staff to post all curricular materials to Canvas to the extent practicable and as promptly as possible. 3, all parents are welcome at any time to inquire and learn about any aspect of the curriculum from the teaching staff and administration. I think we could accomplish what we want to accomplish, folks, very simply, without burdening the teachers and without potentially disrupting a healthy one-team relationship. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Madam Chairman, for giving me that time.
Thank you, Craig. Is there any further discussion?
Looking at this first time I've been looking at Craig's stuff, and I do appreciate the effort that he put into here of making it simplistic. I mean, from my point of view of as a parent of looking at the transparency of curriculum, I saw tremendous strides just in this past year where I've personally signed off on syllabuses of, you know, saying, hey, these are the textbooks that the kids are using and whatnot. This is the flow. And then also the information that's available on Canvas today. And when I went to open house, the teachers very concerted effort of showing parents where everything is on Canvas. And I'm in favor of the revised policy that Craig has outlined here.
So I'm a little frustrated, Craig. This is the second time that you brought forth something at this meeting that we even said again in this last policy meeting that we wanted to get all the things on the table. Anybody that had any concerns, and I thought we had done that at the policy meeting. We have over 80% of our staff that's currently doing this. We are allowing grace. We are giving them a grace period. We do have a motion and a second on the table for the current policy as it stands. And I'm just frustrated that you're bringing this forth again, another chance to kick this back.
May I make a response?
Yes, please.
And that is that the essence of what I've said here, I also said last week in the policy committee meeting, just verbally. I didn't put it in writing, but I said it verbally, and hoping to get some response from you or others, and I got none. So I am trying to.
Just a comment I want to make, and just to kind of think through our statements as well as statements. I'm looking at this beyond just the policy that is written, looking at it from the point of view of things that we have talked about related to other issues like where we stand from a fiscal standpoint, financial standpoint, to looking at the potential need that at some point we may have to have a referendum. I know when I talk to community members, whether they had students here, students at our feeder schools, or just community members, this topic was normally in the top 3 of the things that they wanted to talk about and to get them to understand on. And to make sure that the curriculum was readily available and transparent. And they asked me a lot of questions about what was already in the curriculum. So I think this is one thing that that we can leverage when we are asking, if we ask the broader community for a referendum. This is something that I think the broader community would stand behind and be that token of support when we come to the table to ask, because we could clearly say, excerpt right from the policy if needed, that this is what Arrowhead is doing in terms of transparency for our curriculum. So I think if that, looking forward, this is going to be something that benefits the school for longer term. Yes, is there an immediate burden on some of the teachers, even though 80% of them already do it, or 80% of it is already there? That's why that grace period is there to try to accommodate. That's why we have a lengthy discussion on it not being punitive in any way. The board isn't the one that administers that piece of it anyway. That's up to the administration. We're not going to get into the oversight of what that means. But I still think that this has been indirectly asked for, at least to me, by the community members that I've talked to. So I, for one, am still in support. I like your simple approach, but even the number 3 doesn't get at what I think the community would be asking for. But in this case, it's too reactionary to something that they could inquire about at some given point versus being proactive, having it available in real time.
I think this would be sufficient to be able to put out there in terms of leverage in response to. to state that. Do we have a policy? It's very concise and clear. So I don't know, as you leverage an upside, in terms of a referendum, I would tell you that I believe very concerned about the downside of how this will affect the morale and attitude of our staff when we continue to layer more burdens upon them. And I'm very concerned about that. So we'll see what will happen, but that's a big concern of mine.
I think that our administration will be able to execute the procedure in such a way that hopefully the culture is not affected. You got a great team here, Laura. I have tons of faith in the fact that you're gonna execute this in the right way, that hopefully that was the intent of coming back to this meeting, so it wouldn't be as burdensome and it wouldn't be as punitive. It would offer grace, and that was what we agreed on with us as a committee and the administration as well. I mean, administration weighed in on this multiple times. So.
Right, I feel like that's what we talked about at the committee meeting, was making sure that was implemented in the best way.
Right.
Well, administratively, we will follow your policy. So if it's passed, it's all materials. So that's how we will have to implement it, which might be a change for many teachers compared to what is, I mentioned in committee, there's two different ways to look at it. If it's, what is my child learning in class? I would contend that is in Canvas already. If the intent is, I want to scrutinize everything minus what is said, because we can't verbally capture that. If it's about scrutinizing everything, that may not be in Canvas, and that might be quite a bit of additional work for many teachers.
What I was getting at was the administration has the ability to execute this policy in a positive way, rather than tee it up to the teachers as a burdensome, another thing the boards might throw at us. That's not how you guys need to spin this.
Right.
So you guys manage the culture, which we have all faith in you guys to do that. That's what you guys manage. We're not there every day to manage that culture. So.
And we try our best to manage that culture under 100%. The policies that the board passes.
With all due respect, Brad and Laura, if you go to procedure, which is what the administration must use in order to administrate this, Section C has word for word what was deleted from the policy, the second paragraph of the policy back in the policy committee meeting last week. So it has all the detail of news publications, website resources, slide presentations, audio recordings, instructional handouts, worksheets, digital materials, video descriptions.
Right, those things were all present.
But by the way, administration is the one that drafts procedure. They could come back and draft this tomorrow.
And I would expect them to do that in a manner of, frankly, try to implement it just out of the sheer magnitude of what that actually turned into. There may be a proposal from the administration back to modify the procedure or something. And that's within our way of conducting it. So I don't still look at this as this is once and done, but procedure is fluid. With administrative recommendation to come back. So this is the initial intent. Just like everything that goes the first time, it's not going to be perfect right out of the gate. There's going to be the opportunity for CI continuously.
And we have very much.
That's confusing to me because if it's all materials.
But it's in procedure, so the administration has the ability to change procedure without even for the most part.
Okay, so if we change what all materials mean, is that okay with the board? If all materials means core curricular materials and primary supplemental materials. I don't think that's the intention.
I think the item in discussion here is really the author, title, ISBN, data publication, publishing. Some of that might be a little redundant, which I would anticipate a little pushback from administration on this there.
Well, and I think that the key to really, the taking it out of policy was so that we don't have teachers feeling like this has to be bibliography based. Like they have to write a bibliography and that's got to be put in. The whole intent was again, to just, if there's a hyperlink, throw on hyperlink. If there's a newspaper article, scan and upload, whatever that is. We even had, discussion from our superintendent and our director of learning at this last meeting that I thought came to the table with a point of view that was somewhat in, maybe not direct support, but somewhat of a attitude of, yeah, we'll get it done. We'll make it happen. So I'm a little surprised on the tone again tonight. I feel like this has been kicked back a couple times. I feel like we've done our due diligence as a board to make this as accommodating as possible, with lots of grace, even the word added to the policy and the procedure. So I still stand by it.
Are we moving on the policy and the procedure or just the policy? Because you said something about that, the administration would have flex on the procedure.
Well, typically when a new procedure is adopted, the board acts on that. And then per your policy about making policy, if there's minor changes to procedures, administration has the authority to do that. If there's a change to procedure that's material in nature, so a significant change, then that should come back to the board.
Or at least given notice to the board.
Right, yeah, you're correct. Notice to the board.
So, I mean, we can still approve as a motion. You guys, I agree with Tim here.
With all respect, we've had copious discussion, both here and in what is truly our working meeting in policy on many locations. And we've gone through repeated drafts on this. So in appreciation for the comments again this evening, but out of some real respect to both the process and the level of conversation that has ensued around this to date. We've had.
Go ahead, it was your boss.
We have a motion and a second on the table. We've had discussion. And I'm going to take this to a roll call vote right now. Board member Evers, your vote. Aye.
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 No.
Nay.
Aye.
The ayes have it. 5-2. Thank you so much. Next meeting date for policy.
December 1st.
Very good, thank you. Moving on, other reports. I thought I would bring a few things forward from my attendance at the WASB Fall Regional Meeting that was held in October in Mount Falls. The focus of the breakout was on holding effective meetings. The dinner meeting itself included the election of officers, discussion around WASB resolutions for the upcoming year, and of interest, a presentation on the issues facing schools heading into the state's budget debate. While discussion lagging state support, the following will mention. School referendums for basic budget expenses hit a 10-year high. Wisconsin's national ranking on our per pupil funding for K-12 ed has dropped from number 1 in 2002 to number 25 in 2020. No revenue limit adjustment has been felt by any of us, as Jeff alluded to earlier, in 6 of the last 8 years. Additionally, the discussed DPI budget request, good, bad, or otherwise, contains the following. 2.5 billion of the 5+ billion surplus is looking to be allocated. Revenue limit increases in the realm of $350 and $650. Per pupil increases of $24 and $45 respectively. Special ed aid reimbursement of 45% and 60% to a target of $750 million. And the DPI has also requested a boost in mental health funding, which would be provided as categorical aid as opposed to our current grant model funding. So that's out of WASB. Is there any CISA report from Mr. Evers?
No report at this point, but I am in the process of going through the systems upcoming calendar to see if there's anything that we should participate in for the next month.
Good. Thank you. New business. Employee transactions. Resignations and retirements. There's one resignation. Do I have a motion to approve the resignation?
I approve the resignation.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Has she been with the school one time?
Over 20 years.
That's what I thought. I thought that was the one that I was thinking of. Let her know she'll be missed.
Any further discussion? We have a motion to approve the resignation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Contracts, letters of appointment.
Let's make a motion to approve letters of appointment.
I second.
Any discussion on the support staff and letters of appointment as written? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any future, discussion and actions of donations? I don't believe there were any. Future agenda items. Okay.
Is open enrollment counts, is that December or is that June?
January, that comes to the January board meeting.
Okay.
Okay, at this point in the meeting, pursuant to state statute 19.851C, the board will move into a closed session and reconvene to address public business matters. Motion to move into closed session.
I make a motion to move into closed session.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?